Please welcome producer and actor Jake Gyllenhaal. And for all of you, I just want to point out, this is the first time that Jake does an in-person Q&A and in front of a live audience, so.
We're in this together. We're all in this together. So nice.
Great job.
Well, so much for the obvious. You know, Jake, you saw, this is a remake. You saw it in 2018 at Sundance. What was it about this project that you needed to I mean, you bought the rights, you needed to make it, you were the producer, and the fire behind it all. You know, what was it about the subject matter that appealed to you?
You know, I can't tell you exactly why I felt in my bones that I wanted to remake it. I'm not someone who generally wants to remake films, you know, ones that already the original is such an incredible film. But I felt like at the time that I saw it, maybe it was somewhat unconscious or prophetic somehow. The world is in a particular place where I felt like if you transpose the story to America, that somehow all the sort of undercurrents and messages of what the story was saying would be perfect for this space. It would ask questions inside of a thriller that I thought were really important, and it just felt right to me. And it also, I love the idea technically of playing with. We watch so many movies, and we watch so many filmmakers fill the screen with everything in the kitchen sink, you know, and to take all of the characters out and have them just be in our ears, and have our imaginations turn on, as opposed to have it shown to us, everything, really turned me on.
Yeah, I actually, Jake was off-Broadway and on Broadway in a one-man show, basically, monologue.
Two-man show.
Two-man show.
One man on stage at a time, but two men in the show.
And I mentioned that what was remarkable about watching you on stage was that there was so much that left for the audience to imagine, and you do a similar thing in this movie where it demands for us to watch this film in a different way. We have to listen in a way that we're not used to listening, and also we have to be engaged imagination-wise because things are not being pre-digested for us. Is that one of the parts of the film that attracted it?
Absolutely, I think. There's nothing that beats our imagination, our individual imaginations, you know, right? And I believe from having been up on stage, having witnessed it viscerally every night for a whole year, I did the monologue for an entire year. And every night, not always at the same time, and sometimes, some nights it wouldn't happen, but usually you could feel as you started to speak, the imagination of the audience turn on. And then you disappear, and then their story, whatever their story was, came into their minds. And you could feel that as the performer on stage, that switch turn on. And I just could feel that power every night. And maybe when we entered into this pandemic and everything was going on, we were looking at what projects we had at my company that we could possibly do if given the opportunity in that time, this thing appeared. And we thought, this is something we can absolutely do. And I thought, what an amazing opportunity to sort of give an audience cinematically the option to have their imaginations fill in the blanks. A lot of people say, oh, you're up on screen the whole time. And I'm like, well, not really. I think everyone's in their heads at a certain point, picturing what those scenes are like and what's happening to Emily and how Henry feels and where he is and how he's walking around the car. And to me, I feel like that's all you're doing. And I love that idea.
There's one moment that it struck me, I got very emotional when I heard it, is when Emily first calls and she says, I just want to talk to you. And all of a sudden, the movie goes into this whole just deep layer. Can you tell us about that scene and the importance of Emily saying, "I just want to talk to you"?
Yeah, I think there was a distinctive difference. So we shot the movie in 5 parts over 11 days. And we shot it in October 2020. And we at first said, let's shoot it in 5 days, because we didn't know how much time we would have or if we'd get shut down. And then we settled on 11. And what we did was block out each act. There were 5 acts. Each were 20 pages, and we shot 20 pages a day. And we shot 20-minute long takes, 20, 30-minute long takes. And we had the actors on Zoom. And then we had our first AD cueing the actors through the call, through our action. We would rehearse it a few times in the morning, and then we would just spend the whole day shooting that act. And that specific moment of Emily saying, "I just want to talk to you." But even right before that, the sort of break in him being alone in his mind after calling his wife and thinking about his daughter, the journey then becomes a sort of unconscious journey for him. And I always believed that Emily was him sort of talking to himself and the things that he needed. And that's when the movie really becomes an internal journey for him. He's staring at that Alka-Seltzer, and then she calls. And that's when the dream begins. That's when the fantasy begins. Because I do believe the movie is a lot of, if you speak politically, a fantasy. A fantasy of what we hope will happen. That we hope that people in his position who have done whatever he did would admit to that guilt and that truth. That's what I think we hope. And that's why it's a fantasy, because I don't think we live in that world fully. But I think it's very important to tell that story. To tell the story of the fantasy, because I believe the power that potential fantasy can maybe do something in the world.
And from your vantage point as an actor, the movie, when I introduce the movie, I say that it has multiple layers. You can, on the surface, be highly entertained, and it's highly entertaining. You're at the edge of your seat, but there's so much subtext and so much going on underneath. I see it as a fever dream. You're like in the landscape of the mind of this character. From an actor point of view, was that challenging for you to navigate the specificity of the action, what was happening, but then internally he's struggling with his own demons as well?
I mean, it's in technically doing it, there were a lot of technical issues. I had my own voice for the first 2 days repeating in my ear, like a bad phone call. Ones that we tend to hang up, but I couldn't. And somehow that really added to my insanity. And I went with it. I had no choice, and I went with it. I think the specific stuff happens because there are these wonderful actors on the other end of the line who are so alive. I mean, we were able to ask some incredible performers to come in for a short period of time, and they just made me come alive, as any good performer does. The call came in and it was real. I think navigating the pressure that he's put under, the process that we were in, shooting in such a short period of time, knowing we had to deliver, and there was a lot at stake, and really thinking about the context of the real world at the time. The Friday before we were supposed to start shooting on the Monday, Antoine Fuqua, our director, was near someone who was tested positive for COVID, and so he had to go into quarantine, which meant that we were shooting for 11 days, and he had to go away for 12 days. So it meant that we would, even if we could push it, might lose our cast, we would lose our department heads, all stuff. And so we devised this whole plan to put Antoine in a van a block away and hardwire him to the stage. And he directed the entire movie from a van with the monitors and talking on a walkie-talkie to me and us FaceTiming in between the takes. So that process, that thing that happened while we were making it, added so much pressure to both of us. And I think as we went farther and farther, and as we made each day, as we didn't shut down, as someone didn't test positive, something didn't happen, I think the pressure just loaded on us. And Antoine did a thing where he just put me in a smaller space. By the end, the lenses he's using the camera was so close to my face, there were 3 cameras shooting me all the time, that literally I could not move by the end of that piece. So he like entrapped me by the end. At the beginning, he was, 6 feet away. And by the end, he was like, you're not fucking going anywhere. And I think that was really added physical pressure to me. Well, everyone started calling in. Riley Keough, who plays Emily, who does such a beautiful job. She went through a very, very hard year before and lost someone she loved, and all that is in there. And so we were communicating about all that. There were times in between takes where I would just call her and just ask her if she was okay. She's so brave to put those feelings into that space. So I think everybody just added to that pressure and tension and specificity.
You alluded to the fact that you were locked. He locked you in. Your character, Joe, in different circumstances, he will be out there. He's an action person, but then he's locked into a chair. Can you tell us about balancing those two? That a character that would be physically out there doing things, and the fact that you're in a chair.
I mean, yeah, Antoine, for the beginning of the film, said, I'm not allowed to move my camera. You're not allowed to move out of that chair. As much as you want to, we're both very physical people. It's where we really meet. We love it. I mean, he was, in that van, doing bicep curls, he was just so he's a very physical guy. And this character is a very physical guy. And so he just forced me to stay there. And I think that forcing me to stay in that space, and also over 12 to 14 hours a day, trying to keep your mind clear as these calls came in, and even just remembering your lines, where you're not even sort of getting out and running around and getting your energy up. It's a whole other type of exercise. And it was exhausting, but also it helped. It drove me crazy.
One of the things I just adore about the film is that not only are you trying to save Emily and her child, but by doing so, you have to come into grips with your own demons and your own truth. Can you tell us about navigating those two objectives? Was that challenging to handle both journeys of the character?
For Antoine and I, we spoke from the beginning that this was a movie about truth. Obviously, it's pretty clear, the first quotation that comes up, and you make it as obvious as possible. But I think it's important to make it obvious, because the movie for us was always about you. If you tell the truth, you may not be redeemed on this earth, but you will be redeemed spiritually. And by having that happen, you will then fix the system. And that was the journey. That was what we always spoke about. And so, to me, the essence of it is and was that idea. I think that's really why I wanted to tell a story. I was just so thrilled that it was such a taut thriller that, like you said, held people's attention. But I think in the end, the thing that spoke to my heart was this idea of redemption, that it's possible. It's possible to be deeply imperfect, to make terrible mistakes, and to still be redeemed, and to pay for it, that there are consequences for this character, and that is important, and it's necessary, but that he is free in his own mind, and he has saved his daughter's life and given her the truth. And that was everything for me and Antoine.
The opening shot of the movie is the fires, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I see an allegorical aspect to the film where you're like a short fuse, and you have the inhaler, and it's like a slow burn. Things are catching up on fire with your character. Am I smoking something that?
No, let's go there, man. I'm into it. Yes, absolutely. I'll ride that with you. Absolutely. I think Antoine will say, and since he's not here, I will quote him, and I don't think he'll mind me doing it, that he always thought of it as sort of Dante's Inferno, that, he had hit that space. And when you hit that space, it's now a psychological journey. Can he get up and out of that space? Obviously, it reflects where we are in the world environmentally as well, and that was important to turn that up. But yeah, I think that spark, that sort of toxicity that the character begins with, how he speaks to all of those callers initially that come in like, did you do drugs? You shouldn't do that. He's dragging the match across he's desperate to blow the whole thing up somewhere. And then I think Emily calls. Mm-hmm.
Your emotional arc in this movie is surreal. I mean, you're a volcano. How difficult was it to calibrate, the emotional journey of the character?
Well, I think you said before when we were speaking outside about the theatricality of the piece. It's theatrical in the space of that. Obviously, like you said before, it exists like a monologue in a particular way, but also it is an allegory in that way, and that's why it was meant to explode, right? It was meant to actually physically, that's what we spoke about. It's meant to be bigger, like as the other characters are sort of somber, used to the job, it sort of has there's a sort of mundane quality, the way they do things, kind of come in slowly, apathetic, to survive in a world like that. He just rages, right? That was, I think, given the time we were all in, where I was so grateful to be a performer, the ability to exercise like those feelings that I think so many people were feeling, that we have the arts to express ourselves, saves us in times like that. And that's what I felt about this piece. It was like, for me, when I've seen it and as we've finished the movie and all that stuff, what I realized is it is, for me, a real expression of a period of time, a very specific period of time that we were going through. And I think that we all are still, but very specific to this period of time. Sort of, we're all holed up in our homes for so long, and we just want to tear the walls down, and yeah.
Well, I mean, it's not a question, it's more of a statement about, like, I was blown away by your performance. It's like, you go to places that it's so risky and it's so rewarding to watch. It's incredible performance, what you've done. Speaking of performances, how did you guys come across? The cast is remarkable, and now that you've seen the movie, you have Ethan Hawke, you have Paul Dano, and one of the delicious parts of the movie is trying, like, oh, I recognize that voice. Who is that? How did you guys come, casting?
There were advantages to this pandemic. Not many, but Ethan Hawke was at home, and Peter Sarsgaard was at home, and Paul Dano was in Australia still working, because that guy just really works all the time. No, but like, we called our friends and we said, we're doing this thing. We've scheduled it, so could you come in for a few hours a day at different times? We'll work around what you need to do. And Antoine called Ethan, and Ethan said, yeah, what are you guys doing? Like, this sounds great. I called my family.
Not Peter.
Peter Sarsgaard is my brother-in-law. I was like, I know you're not doing anything, so you're doing this. The funny story is actually, when we were filming the scene, he plays Henry in the movie, and when has this amazing scene where he's just been hit by the brick, and he was at home in New York, and my nieces were at home, and he was doing that scene really loudly in a room, and my sister had to take my nieces out for like a walk, because they were like, what's wrong with Dad? And they said, "Oh, she's just talking to Uncle Jake," and I was like, there was. We just called friends, and they showed up, and it was really wonderful. And they were all shooting. They were all doing this. We sent them. I mean, the logistics of this were pretty crazy. We sent them recording boxes, and then they would all sit there, and record themselves, and then they would call into a Zoom, and then just negotiating how to cue for the first day, what I cued, what our first AD cued off of me, how we could do that, how we cued lighting effects and stuff because there were no actual ability to make a call through. Normally, if it were in a regular time, we would probably have the other actors in another room and they'd be on the end of a line. What we had was Zoom, and most of us here know about Zoom is that you can't really interrupt each other. When you get onto a Zoom, you're always like, hi, oh, hi, and like, oh, is it yellow around my box? Hi, and you can't act like that. We were dictated by this technology. So when you would normally feel a rhythm as an actor and set it, it's the best part of acting. It's like just the rhythm. You couldn't, Zoom told you. So I became an expert at like circumventing Zoom through sound, the sound. So I knew I knew they couldn't hear me, and they knew they couldn't hear back in time, but they knew the end of the line. So I would start a little bit later or a little bit earlier, depending on how we needed the line or wanted the line to go. If I felt like I wanted to interrupt, I had to think like 3 beats before I would normally think. It was maddening, but pretty interesting experience, and thank God it was only 11 days.
But taking that even further, how hard was it for you to be listening to all this echoes and timing vis-a-vis Joe Baylor's journey? Did that help, or?
Yeah, yes and no. There were moments where Antoine says, I just couldn't do it anymore. I couldn't, I think we all know that feeling of like when your voice is repeating on the other line, or there's something where it's so hard to hear what the other person's saying because you hear your voice repeat as someone else is speaking. And there were a number of times where it really frustrated me. I got really upset. But I also think that that's the space, right? I have a belief that, and it's the wonderful thing about being on the stage, and after a long run, you revel in mistakes. Like when something goes off, it's great. It's something's alive. You're alive again. After 100 performances, someone drops something or someone misses a cue or something's happening out there, you're alive again. And so I was looking for that in this. And when it would piss me off and it was infuriating and I couldn't hear, or I wanted the rhythm to be a certain way, and it wasn't going my way, I knew I had a director on the other end who was like, I'm still filming you. I'm not going to take as witnessed by, I'm going to get closer in the next scene, so it was just sort of him capturing all those feelings and feeling safe to give him all of them, even when I was frustrated.
Which leads me to the next question. You work with Antoine in Southpaw. I don't recall seeing a movie where I was so aware of the level of intimacy between a director and a performer. Was that the case? The fact that, you are on the limb in this film, but it feels like to me that you were supported by your relationship, the intimate relationship between you and the director.
The great irony is that we have not seen each other in a year and a half. We weren't even allowed to when we wrapped the movie. And we do all of our interviews on Zoom. And even in post on this movie, we did everything through that crazy computer program. I never saw the editor in person. But I have not seen Antoine, and yet I just I love him, number one, because the actors he's worked with, whether it's something he inherently has always loved, I think he says he has, or if it's something he's learned from these, from Denzel and Ethan, and, he gives you so much space. There's so much respect for, he creates a space, then he gives it to you. There's just so much love for that. I'll go anywhere for him. And as a result of that, and just as a result of him just being a good man with a real sense of, he's just got a good heart. And so, yeah, I mean, we are very close. And yeah, I adore him. I mean, if you can't tell. Yeah.
And it sounds like, I mean this in a good way. It seems like this was the ideal movie to make during COVID.
It was like sort of the only movie to make during COVID. But yes, ideal. Because, yeah, first of all, there was obviously one character. We could shoot it over a very short period of time on one location. It was all technically sort of, the opportunity was there. There wasn't too much complicated stuff. And I think it's hard to remember now what state of mind the world was in, Los Angeles was in particularly, and that nobody was really working that much in our business, you know? So it was like all these people going, are we going to risk doing this? Yes, we all want to work. There was this deep gratitude for the work in a way that I never have ever felt. As much as we all may love what we do, the gratitude to be working was there. But yeah, it was perfect in a way. Still very scary.
And last question is, we briefly chatted before we came here about Sidney Lumet, and I was telling you how much I love this film because it reminds me of Sidney Lumet films like Network and 12 Angry Men, where you have this wise, angry, stubborn characters but there is a humanity to it. You know, can you tell us about the Sidney Lumet influence in you and Antoine?
Well, I have a personal Sidney Lumet influence that my mother wrote a screenplay called Running on Empty that Sidney Lumet directed. So I watched his process when I was a little boy. I watched that. I didn't care or know who he was at the time. I was too young to understand. But subsequently, obviously, he is who he was, or he was who he is, whatever. And almost everything I witnessed and the way that movie went as watching it be made had so many influences on the movies I love, and then also my own process. You know, I mean, I remember watching him shoot something in one take and then half a take, and he was done, moved on. Day ended half day. Everyone went home. And it was incredible. Because they had rehearsed, because they had actually come from the theater. He had that process of spending time, making the intimacy, and then shooting it as if it were a real performance. But Antoine referenced Sidney all the time. It's like Sidney is his main reference constantly. And as soon as he read this script, I sent him the script, and he said he would do it the next day. And he said, well, I coaxed him in because I said, we'll shoot it in 5 days, and I knew he was only available for 5 days. So that was not how I know I could get him. But he always mentioned, immediately, he mentioned Sidney Lumet, and I think he is his hero, and I think that's why he wanted to make the movie. And I think it's more of the type of movie that he wants to make and that he should be making. You know?
I lied. I said it was the last question. But, you know, the fact that the expedience of the film, you know, 11 days, although you wanted it to be 5 days, how the feverish deadline of the film, why did you want it to be done so quickly? Did you understand that would add to the urgency of the film?
I mean, personally, there are a number of things. Producerially, it was cheaper, obviously. As an actor, and it was also, but it has to match, you know. I think the technique has to match the financial qualities of what's happening, you know. So, for me as an actor, I wanted the challenge. I revel in the challenge, and I get off on the challenge of different things, and I had just come off stage for a year. I did feel like it was possible to do this. At a certain point, I thought it was possible to do it in 48 hours. So now it's not a character. I actually am insane. But I really did think if I memorized it and we rehearsed it enough, we could shoot it in 48 hours. And that just seemed fun to me. It felt like I've gotten a lot of tools over this career that I've learned. Felt like I could use them. A lot of times I don't bring certain ones out. I could use them all. And then when Antoine said, I need a little more than that to make a movie of some scope, we actually shot the whole. He said, "I'm going to shoot the whole performance. I'm going to stay close up on you. We're going to shoot the whole movie all the way through, start to finish." And then I'm going to go back, because we were also very worried that if something happened to me, if I had gotten COVID in the middle of it, he knew that if he could just get through me, then he could put a stand-in or something in, or he could put someone in and shoot wide shots, and he could shoot corners and things like that, and close-ups and inserts without me. So he was sort of like feverishly trying to shoot my stuff. We shot it in 9 days, all of my stuff. And I was like, we're done, 9. We got it in 9. We were racing at a certain point. It was a little sick. And he's like, we did. But now I have to go get the movie. So give me 2 more days, And that's what we did. I think there was just something about the fear that we wouldn't be able to do it, the challenge of being able to do it and seeing if we could, and just kind of making the risk pretty high. And I'm not going to tell you that I didn't go through a number of bottles of wine throughout those 11 days. But
wine? That's tame.
And
Vodka.
I don't even really drink. So, but it was part of the fun, was that the pressure.
And I think we sort of addressed this at the beginning, but one of the powerful things about this film is that it works on a surface level. 90 minutes, you're at the edge of your seat, but there is a lot throughout to think about and ponder, not only about our current situations, socially, politically, et cetera. Was that something that you and Antoine was always talking about, balancing the 2 worlds of the film?
Absolutely. I mean, for us, it was a movie about mental health, and a broken system, a system that didn't allow for these people, particularly these 2 people, but many people who call in, to understand who they were, what they were feeling. I mean, there's so much emotional turmoil that was not allowed to be expressed, so much vulnerability and so much pain, particularly in that toxicity at the beginning, from this man who is clearly behaving badly and has done terrible things, And then Emily, who calls up, who the system has betrayed, right. And I think that for us was the driving force, was creating a discussion, that what we assume about people we can't see, but that we can hear, why we assume that, why we project that. Is that true, or is that us and what our shame is? And why we don't have a system that can hold those feelings, that does constantly fail. I'm not going to say me, but so many people, and me because of that, and all of us. And that's what we need to work on. And that's what he always said to me. That's why he wanted to make this movie. I mean, that is really ultimately what mattered to him. And I think the issue of mental health was everything. And, we're coming off of so many social, political, environmental things. I mean, we added the fires in probably a month before shooting. We were sort of trying to add things in as we went. And we changed it to Los Angeles. It was in another city before, and when Antoine came on, he said, I want it in LA. So we moved it to Los Angeles. Yeah, I mean, it was very, very important to both of us.
Well, thank you for being here. You're you're such an exciting.
You can say young actor.
No. Would that make you happy? Yeah. No, you're just. No. It's just you're such a risk taker. I mean, I think about the choices you've been making, and it's just scintillating to watch. You know, Nightcrawler and this, and it's like, wow. Yeah, I don't think people give you enough credit for the choices you make, and your acting is phenomenal in this. Kudos and congrats.
Thank you.